Hello, this is Erica with Launching Legacies. Welcome to our daily devotional. Today we are actually just kind of going to talk about the application of Old Testament prophets and why their books were written. Because one thing we need to discuss, and when we talk about the books of prophecy as a section of the Old Testament, we need to recognize, okay, for one, we had the major prophets and the minor prophets. We already talked about that division. 12 minor prophets and let's see, I always forget, 4 major prophets. So when we look at those prophets in their separation, right? Is that right? Then we get to the place of needing to understand what is the purpose of these books of prophecy, because there's a substantial amount of the Old Testament is books of prophecy, but yet these were not the only prophets, right? And so when we look at the major prophets, so it's Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, okay? When we look at those 4 major prophets, we're looking at substantial prophecy from the time that the prophet spoke until the end of the day, or the day of the Lord is a lot of what we hear. The day of the Lord, the return of the Messiah, the characteristics of the Messiah, salvation for all. Those are the current themes that we see at the end of these books of prophecy. But what was the purpose of all of this stuff being written down? What was the purpose of a book being written about what was to happen? Well, prophecy helps to establish the character of God and the accuracy of who God is and what he says he will do, right? So he says something's going to happen thousands of years earlier, and then it plays out. Historically, we can monitor if the invasion of this country, or if the falling of that country, or if this nation did that. Like, we can see that historically happen. And so it brings this credibility to God speaking something and it happening. He's speaking through the prophets and it happening. So it's being recorded. So it's something that in the Old Testament would have been memorized. The prophetic words would have been known. They would have been very familiar to the people, so that when the signs came that the words were being fulfilled, it would be recognized as, oh, that's a fulfillment of the word Joel, or that's a fulfillment of this word or that word or the other word. Now, when we look at the major prophets as opposed to the minor prophets, is again, it's the expansiveness of their prophecy in their books, right? Their books, 66, 48, 52, depending on who you're looking at, different, far, far longer books of prophecy, and far more expansive and far more established prophets than the minor prophets, who were really just regular people who mostly prophesied about specific areas. Now, the minor prophets also do talk about the coming Messiah. They definitely bring a foreshadowing, definitely. Some of them in particular were very, very prophetic into the end times. But most of all, what they do is they set a foundation for the God that we serve. They say, look, this is what God says is going to happen. This is what he really wants. They're exhibiting the relationship between Judah and God, Israel and God, depending on who's prophesying. And they're setting this tone of like, look, this is what God is saying about this. This is what God is saying about that. This is who's going to come next. And so they're kind of setting this credibility so that you can go into the Bible, look at the prophets, the minor and the major prophets, and historically you use a history book and say, okay, what they said would happen did indeed happen. Okay, what they said would happen did indeed happen. So then God is establishing himself as true, as living, as breathing, as, credible, a credible source. And as we establish God as a credible source, it's easier for man to trust him because we find him to be credible. Unfortunately, we haven't spent enough time looking at the things that clearly established the credibility of God, and so people's own emotional issues kind of detract from their belief and trust in him. But God is credible, and he's proven it time in and time out, time and time again. He's shown his credibility through the things that he said and the way that they were performed. However, there is controversy amongst the world of not trying to believe or accept what God has said in the Word of God, making it, saying that it's fallible when indeed we believe it is infallible. These things become controversial points, but it's never a question when we see these books of prophecy whether or not what was said would happen actually happened. It happened. It's historical. Like Babylonian captivity was a thing. King Nebuchadnezzar was a real person. Like these things really did happen. So it draws into question those who are skeptic of the Bible, the word of God, the books of prophecy, or whatever else they might be skeptical about is, how did we get such accuracy on so many points and still you feel inaccuracy on others? Well, it's a matter of faith, right? Everything is not fully evidentiary. Some of it has to come through our faith. We have to believe. And so that's what the prophets draw us into, a place in which we need to see that God said that he would do it and he did it. And then say, but will you believe? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to simple faith. It just comes down to it. And so that's kind of a wrap up for the books of prophecy, the major prophets. And so I'm going to run down the list of prophets again, just so you know where the division of prophecy is in the Bible. These books are all prophetic. There's 12 minor, 4 major. And so we have Jeremiah, right? Isaiah first. Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. And I forgot Joel. He's in there somewhere too. Obadiah, Joel. They're out of there. But they're in there too, because there's 12 of them. So when you put them in order, they substantially create a large part of the foundation for our faith and belief that God said he would do it and he does it. So be mindful that they're not all people. All people don't necessarily believe in the credibility of the prophecy, but the history shows us that indeed what these men said would happen did happen, and after they said it. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this series on the prophets, and I hope that you will join us again next week. We'll be back Monday with another series of devotionals. I'm going to take it a little bit more personal, so I hope you're ready for that. Brace yourself. And we're going to get into some personal issues, maybe some areas where Christians in general should examine ourselves. All right. Thank you. See you again on Monday. We're praying for you. We hope you're praying for us. And until Monday, be blessed.